So, I did a stream the other day, but without talking, just quiet development, answering a few questions while I worked in the Twitch chat, which I can do again now, not the Discord chat because that can be a bit too overwhelming. This time I haven't advertised it as an event on our Discord or mentioned it in the general chat because we have so many members it can be a bit overwhelming if dozens of people hop on to watch. So I'll just explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing the stream. I used to do a lot more, teaching people how to use the tool set, talking about what I'm doing on Arelith. I stopped doing it because really I'm not a natural streamer. I spend my time working on Arelith. I was also working on DLCs and various real life things, and to be honest, it just got a bit too much for me. But I've got a bit more time now. I've just finished working on a new upcoming DLC. I'm back focused on Arelith, and yeah, there were some outstanding questions. What you can see in the tool set at the moment in front of you is the Moonsea DLC. So, for instance, this here is Elven Tree. Let me just remove the sound icons so it's not so cluttered. Back when we made this, we had a lot of these models made for the module. This, giant tree, for instance. And Tyrants of the Moonsea was a discontinued official module for Neverwinter Nights before the DLCs all stopped. It was about 20% done when it was brought back to life for the enhanced edition. So I went over the original areas to improve them and created all the new areas that were needed. So if I just hop over to the Hills Farm Merchant District, Hills Far, for instance, was one of the completed areas, or one of the ones that had already been made on the original, but it was very sparse, as were all old DLCs. So when I came and revisited this, it was just a question of doing a lot more placeable and lighting work. It really was quite small stuff. So for instance, here, everything you can see outside the city is outside the actual buildable grid. The area ends here where you can see me scrolling. And I just used grass placeable in trees, so when you look outside the city, you can see the world beyond it. In the original, you couldn't. If you looked outside the city, you would just see a vast empty plain of the city disappearing into the distance. A lot of people don't know that you can put placeables outside the grid on Neverwinter Nights. It allows you to create, really nice views if you've got the placeables to work with. So yeah, it's quite a good thing to do. It's not easy to do, or rather, it's not instinctive. So what I have here is a giant grass placeable that you can see there's a couple there that I put on the edge of the area. The actual node of it, you can see where the arrow is here, is within the playable area, and the rest of it stretches out. Once you put something like that down, let me just rotate it a bit so you can see. That's the actual edge of the area. So once you once you put something down, you can then lay other things on top of it outside the grid, so creating these these big views, which was just part of making it nicer for the enhanced edition. And with some of the stuff, like with Elmwood here, I was using existing Neverwinter Nights assets, albeit with some people on hand to help me make new ones. People like Bill Harper that's worked on a lot of Neverwinter Nights stuff and updated the tool set. That's why I've got all these extra high cliffs here, because I asked for these cliffs to be made, which now exist, everywhere on Neverwinter Nights. But the main attraction really came from having Zvercules tile sets to work with. These were used for Melvaunt. Open it up. That's the market area of Melvaunt. Mulmaster, which is using the same tile set. This tile set, Medieval City, is unusual for Neverwinter Nights in that it has both nature and city within the same tile set. Now, anyone familiar with Neverwinter Nights, the tile sets would be city or rural or various interiors, but they wouldn't have both of them on the same. So you'd have to leave a wilderness area to enter the city. This tile set allowed you to be in the wilderness and walk directly through the city gates without area transitions, and it just makes for it to be a lot prettier. The other city here, using the new tile set, was Thentia. This doesn't use the medieval city, it uses medieval rural, which also has plenty of buildings. Yeah, and with each of these, we stuck very closely to the source books. We used the maps of the source books. We looked at what the main buildings were, and those that were important for the narrative were used. Um, so, as for why I am showing this off, it's a very different thing making a single player module to making a persistent world like Arelith. Not only is it that you have players that will stay in an area for years, in Arelith's case 20 years on end, and in a single player module they'll visit them only once, but also with a single player module you're jumping from one action area to another. You're not rarely actually just wandering around exploring a world as one did, say, in the original Baldur's Gate game or in any of the Fallout games. You will transition from one like narrative point to another. So the larger Moonsea, the countryside around it, the connecting roads, all of that isn't really made. There'll be a few encounter areas that, like on the Shind Road in this one, but not the sort of full Moonsea. There are other interesting areas in here. Zental Keep, Vunlar, which uses the another not a new tile set from Zerkules, but an updated version of the Winter Rural. But yeah, it's a different process, and it's quite a lot of fun. There's a lot more scripting, but the area design itself, honestly, it's less detailed. Much more care goes into producing areas for Arelith, as I said, because they're used for 20 years on end. People will effectively live in them and not just visit them once for maybe 10 minutes as they go through that area of a campaign. So, and this is not just true for Arelith, it's true for all persistent worlds. The care that goes into dressing some of these areas can be, extreme. Kind of worryingly so, given how much time it takes to place endless placeables. So, yeah, it's a different process. Um, the reason I'm showing this is back when I worked on Moonsea, I made it clear that I wanted to use these areas on Arelith eventually, allowing the players to go and visit the Moonsea and explore. I think there's going to be a real attraction to actually going out and visiting not just places in the Forgotten Realms. A lot of fantastic Neverwinter Nights servers do that, like the Cormier one, where you actually, where it's set within actual Forgotten Realms locations rather than Arelith, which is like a homebrew addition to it. But also because these at least are official locations. They come from an official DLC, so you get to go to the place as it appeared within official content. But there's a problem with wanting to do that. And that is that, as I say, these areas have been built for single player adventuring. Let me just go back to Melvaunt here. Is that Melvaunt or Millmaster? Yeah, it's Melvaunt. I recognize it by the slave enclosure. So, slave enclosure here because Melvaunt, like a lot of places in the Forgotten Realms, has got a big slave trade going on. There's the All Goods shop, all of these kind of, quite important narrative places. But across this area, there's all kinds of scripts and triggers and conversations related to the campaign. All of that to be used on Arelith would need to be stripped away. We want players to be able to explore the areas, not wander around encountering bits of a premium module. So that is the first challenge. The second challenge is building the world around it. As I say, the Moonsea Tyrants of the Moonsea didn't include all the wilderness areas, didn't include all the connecting land. You're talking a huge area, so it would be very hard to make as a single module or persistent world. That's not really stopped me from trying. So I'm going to drop a link into the Twitch chat, and this is just the Forgotten Realms wiki of Thar. This is the area around Moonsea. You'll see a map that you can look at. Let me just find my Twitch window. Yeah. So anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, the recorded version, then yeah, just look at the Forgotten Realms wiki for Thar. You'll see what I'm talking about. I'm only sharing the tool set, so I can't show the map there. So what I'm doing is in Cawdor on Arelith, we have an expedition house. The expedition house was intended when I first made it as somewhere that would link to different places in the Forgotten Realms for a period of time. So maybe for like 3 real life months, someone could go and visit here or there. And I was making areas for this, or one specific area set around the Great Glacier for when it went live. But then everything changed back in 2000, what was it, 2018, 2017, when the enhanced edition came out. And I realized that all of those areas would be better served to launch a new server, a new location. And so that area to be set around, as a narrative area, to be set around the Great Glacier, became Scal on the Distant Shores on Arelith, one of our now more popular starting locations. But back then, it was intended as an expedition house destination area. And I changed everything up and repurposed it to be its own new Arelith server. And the expedition house went largely unused. So, what I'm doing is I'm going to start piecing together the Moonsea, one part at a time, starting with Melvaunt, and creating the regions around it and adding it to the expedition house, adding a second expedition house in Scal, so players can go over there. Long range portal because of adventurers being called for in that region and going and exploring. It won't be like normal Arelith. There won't be houses there. People won't be living there. They'll just be going there to explore and fight somewhat kind of old school, yeah, adventuring. I won't go too much into what the plot is, but it's going to be level restricted. That's why I'm going to have it in Scal as well to begin with, because I think at first it's only going to be like characters between 3 and level 12 that will be eligible to go there. And then as it develops, as I add more and more piecing together the Moonsea until eventually I have all of those cities and lots of the wilderness in between them, with ships going between them all, which would effectively be like, a full standalone server's worth of content. But, it's going to be rolled out little by little as part of an ongoing plot. And for that, I needed to go into the original Tyrants module and get out the relevant areas. And I also needed the map that I just linked because that map shows what I was doing. Now, I'm going to assume you're looking at the map now, but I'm not streaming that because, as I say, I'm just streaming my game window. If you look at Melvaunt on that map, you can see the Tormal River stretching up to a lake and Thar around it, which is a somewhat desolate area. There's the Moonwatch Hills to one side of the city and a road going down to Thentia on the other. Around the Tormal River, you can see farmlands, and then as you get out into the wilderness, You can see like Fangjaw's Hold, that's a band of orcs. The Red Claws, that's a goblin tribe. Up above there, Bloodskull Keep, that's an orcish area. These will be the mobs that will be being used. And in the first part of this release, in the first part of this expedition house, the adventurers of Arelith will be called to help with excessive goblin incursions from the Red Claws into the farmlands around the Tormal River. So that's what that is. Now, I'm going to load up the Arelith Builders module in a minute and show what I've done with these areas specifically. So, where are we? Melvaunt, you can see here. Let me turn the lighting off so you get a better look at it. Two areas this was, the shipyards and the central market. Now, in both of these areas, obviously you don't want to create an entire city. The cities in the Forgotten Realms are pretty massive. So you create a playable area with the city in the distance. I did that throughout this module. So if you can see my mouse cursor here, the playable area where you can see these yellow arrows, these waypoints, this is all blocked off. This is the playable area within the game. Everything else around here is just the rest of the city in the distance. This is quite a small area, so players are not walking around back and forth. And if we go back to the other central market area again, if you follow the mouse from these arrows here, there's the what's it called? The purple portals, I think, that temple, and everything around here, and the stuff off to the side and below is all more dressing, and everything beyond the city, because there was no city gate, was also just dressing. So that's what I started with. I started with that and the map and started putting it together, and I'm going to show you how it's looking in a few moments. But before that, I want to answer some questions. If anyone has them, go ahead and um, and ask them in on Twitch. So we have someone here saying, "What I'm hearing is that Arelith is now officially Forgotten Realms canon." No, it's most definitely not. Arelith, of course, remains homebrew, but it references a lot of. Obviously, it's set within the Forgotten Realms. There's stuff on our website that shows you where we position it in the trackless sea. I don't think Arelith could ever be Forgotten Realms canon, not just because it's not produced by the corporation behind the game, but also because we take extreme liberties with levels and all of that kind of thing. But anyway, I had a question that was sent to me, I think, on our forums very recently. There's plenty on YouTube that I haven't answered, but this one came in just the other day. I just want to open it up and read it and then answer it. Now, this is less to do with Arelith, it's about producing single player modules, and I just want to take some time to answer it. So let me just find it here. So, I'll just read this out. I told them I'd be doing this, so they should be fine with it. Hey, Irongon, I've watched a few of your toolset seminars on YouTube and was getting myself into the mindset of working on a module of my own. It's a short single-player story, but since it's my first foray into module design, I found myself stumped on a few points, most of all designing encounters. With the module that starts around third level, I find myself struggling to estimate what's feasible or too dangerous to fight as a completely solitary character, and I thought about implementing a henchman. I don't know if it's worth the effort. The Neverwinter Nights default henchman concepts are more than a little involved after reading through the Neverwinter Night lexicon tutorials, and worse yet, whether it's really going to solve the issue that plagues me at the core of it all. Since you've contributed to more than a few single-player experiences, Neverwinter Nights, do you have any advice for designing encounters for a single-player module, particularly for low levels? So I wanted to answer this because it's an issue that came up in Tyrants as well. I was lead level designer on it. That means I was making all of the areas and making the dungeons, but I wasn't doing the encounters. Um, because that just wasn't my role on the team. And to be honest, when I read reviews of Tyrants of the Moonsea or Doom of Icewind Dale, which I also worked on, some of the concerns were that it was too easy or too hard depending on what class you were, that the difficulty curve was more of a jagged line. And I've chatted a bit with the writer that produced it, that did all of that about it, and of course it's very, very difficult. Now, Luke Scull, the fantasy author that does these, is much more focused on narrative than he is on dungeoneering. On something like Arelith, we're very concerned with numbers and encounters and making something playable. On a lot of these single player modules, they're concerned about the story. Um, and as a result, the balance maybe hasn't had as much thought put into it as takes place on Persistent Worlds. And again, not just Arelith, all of them. That being said, I do know enough about this to give some helpful feedback. So, the first point to make is that if someone's playing for playability, if someone's playing for challenge, there are better games out there to have that sort of, combat, fantasy combat experience. Neverwinter Nights is super old, it's super slow. Um, the systems are relatively complex, even today. But nevertheless, I think it's safe to assume that anyone playing a single player module is there more for the story, more for playing an official or unofficial or homebrew, whatever, a D&D experience than they are for the combat. But that being said, there's steps you can take to really make it work, and you can see how it's done in the official Neverwinter Nights. The first campaign, The Wailing Death, later on in the one that begins with the kobold, Shadows of Unretentide. And that is when the character at low level enters combat, there are NPCs around that are also fighting. So when you first head out of the temple in the original campaign, the city of Neverwinter is under attack, zombies or whatever, I can't quite remember. Um, and around the city, the guards are fighting them. So if the challenge gets too much and you run away, you can run in the direction of the guards, and the guards will join in the fight. In the beginning of Shadows of Unretentide, you are attacked alongside other adventurers in a large hall and fighting alongside them. The same thing was repeated in the that Pathfinder game. Another similar game, was it Kingmaker? It begins where you're in a place and then everyone's getting attacked, and your character is just fighting off all of the others alongside, others. Yeah, alongside other adventurers, other victims. In the original campaign, as soon as the place is attacked, there is a guard that immediately joins you for the duration and fights through the place with you. These fights are not really there to be challenging, they're more there for people to try out the various abilities of their character, to see how it functions, to how do you play a character that backstabs, what's the most effective tactic playing a mage. In some ways they function as a tutorial, and for it you don't need a henchman. For this you're going to use factions. Neverwinter Nights comes with a faction systems. Generally you can create your own and make it very complex as to who likes who and who doesn't like who. But the three main factions are Hostile, Defender and Commoner. If you're not creating your own, if you put someone as a defender, they're going to fight the enemies. If you put someone as hostile, they're going to be the enemy. So, if you want to do encounters, have other NPCs present that are also fighting. Um, that is the easiest way to do it, and then the character can be as brave as they want. In the original campaign, you can run away and, as I say, go back to where the guards are, and the zombies will follow you there, and then the guards can kill them. You get a bit less experience points, but it's not endlessly having to reload because a zombie hit you. These level 3 characters in Neverwinter Nights are super squishy. Um, so that is that is that's really key to it. And the broader question is, don't make the PC the most powerful thing. Give the character a decent item. Say you give the character a sword with a special ability or a scroll case full of scrolls. You know that every character is going to have that same tool during those first few encounters, and that's going to level the playing field a little. Because in Neverwinter Nights, different classes are horrendously outmatched in terms of power at different levels. Some come into their own later, some never really do. And some will be fantastic from the very beginning, and you're not going to be able to balance an encounter for that. It's going to cut through a sorcerer, but be relatively easy for a battle paladin, sorry, battle cleric in those first few levels. So don't make the PC the most powerful thing. Give them an item that's powerful. Give them some tool that's going to do that. Have henchmen that are as powerful, if not slightly more powerful, than the character. They still get to play, they still get to do the whole combat thing, they still get to test out their abilities, and sure, they'll still die sometimes, but you're never going to get the challenge rating right because the game itself doesn't have an equal challenge between all of the different classes. Now, if you're relatively new to building, and that's the way to do it. Have other people fighting them. Yes, use the henchman system, even if it's complex, although the faction system is much easier, or give the PC a powerful item. If you're more competent with scripting, of course, you can tailor the encounters to the classes. It is possible. Don't use the Neverwinter Nights encounter system. Use the own, the Arelith engine's got a decent one where I can spawn different creatures depending on the class of the character. That is another option, but it's a lot more technical. So that's really the answer to that question. Two parts. Don't make the character the center, the what's everything is balanced against. Balance it against the nearby mobs, the henchmen, an item, or whatever. That's the first point. And the second point is don't get too into it. Remember, people are there for the narrative. They're going to want some challenge. They're going to want something thrown in that makes it a bit tactical, where you're having to think about what you do. But yeah, don't get too bogged down in trying to get that combat balance. It is possible, for instance, if you're fighting mages, a silence spell is going to make all the difference. So you just have an NPC that you talk to says, "Oh, if you're going to go in there, pick up a wand of silence from whoever, or maybe give as part of the plot, give the character some charged item that will cast silence early on, and then they should be able to figure out that okay, they want to save this and use it in this particular encounter. Stuff like that, where different items work as keys to get through stuff. Okay, let me just look through the comments on Twitch briefly. Okay, do you have a specific process for imagining designing your areas before you bring them to the builder? I sometimes struggle with a balance between too much and too little. That's from Vish0352. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of people making areas go into fantastic amounts of detail with placeables, particularly with placeables. Of course, there are creatures and their clothing and lighting and everything else, but they can spend so long trying to just make everything perfect. And most characters will walk straight past it and not even notice. There's stuff. There was a while back, I think a few years back, where the torches that flicker on Neverwinter Nights broke, and they weren't working. Not just on Arelith, they weren't working across the entire of Neverwinter Nights, and I use them extensively. I love that flickering light in a tunnel, um, and nobody had noticed. It was like 4 months later, the entire Neverwinter Nights community, no one had seemingly reported that all these torches had just turned off. And then I was playing, and I thought, why are these torches not working on Arelith? This shouldn't look like that. And I couldn't figure it out, so then I just loaded up a single player module, and it was the same thing. The torches were all turned off, and I contacted Beamdog and was like, hey, all the torches have turned off. No one had noticed, and just the lesson there is you're not necessarily building for yourself. You What you're thinking about isn't necessarily what the players are thinking about. So yeah, don't get bogged down in too much detail. Make something playable. That should always be the aim. It's the same when working on professional titles. If you apply for a job in game design, they don't ask how many games you've worked on, they ask how many shipped titles you've worked on. How many things have you worked on that have been finished? Because that's all that matters. Get it made, and then if people like it, go back and improve it. Then go and add your extra levels of detail. I made the entire of Distant Shores, which was, basically a full-blown Neverwinter Nights server in something like 9 weeks, because I didn't go into the same detail I had done previously on Arelith. I just wanted to get something out there that was playable. Do that first, and then you can always improve it. It's not really worth spending a huge amount of time making something that nobody plays. Make sure people want to play it, and then you can go back and improve it. So, um, okay, so fantastic. The guy that asked me that question is also messaged to say that has helped. So let's go back to what I'm doing with the Moonsea. I'm just going to see how many people we've got watching on Twitch. There's just 7 of you. That's rather good. As I say, I avoided announcing this on our Discord because we have like 5,000 members at the moment, and I don't think I could cope with a chat box that was filled with people. I mean, my aim is to upload this to our YouTube account so people can review it from there. So anyway, let's move forward. The screen's going to go dark for a while because I'm going to close this module and I'm going to open the Arelith Builders module. But keep in mind these 2 areas. This one, the central market, and this one, the shipyard, and of course keep in mind the map I just shared of the areas I'm working on, and this should give you an idea of the process. So, I hope I open the right module. Just close that. Okay, and then the tool set should vanish, and then I can open it again. Hopefully you can all still hear me. I have no idea which is the right module. I have lots of different copies of the same module with different numbers afterwards because the tool set will often crash when you're working on it. You need to save really often, and if it crashes in a weird way and you think it might have broken it, then save under different names or go into your module folder and just rename the file. That's why I have lots of different versions of the same module. Just go in and rename the backup file before opening the backup file, and then you make sure you're not overwriting anything and not accidentally keeping something that still works, that doesn't work. So when a module crashes, next time you open the toolset, it will say, "Oh, we found a backup of this. Do you want me to open it?" And if you click yes to opening the backup and the backup's broken, then you're kind of stuffed. You've lost your entire module. So before you reopen it, go into your module file, find the backup, give it a different name, rename it, and open it as a fresh module. And then you've still got your last saved version that works. And yeah. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the toolset again. This is a huge module because it's got all of the areas. And let's start with Melbourne, these 2 areas. So you can see here all the Melbourne areas that I imported from the original. Let's open the central market. And let's see what I've done with it. Okay, so it's a work in progress, but we can... I've lost my bearings just a bit. So here we go. I've added a city gate here. Otherwise, it's the same. There's the slave area, there's all the various things, there's the route down to the shipyard, but now you can leave it and head across. And it follows the map that I shared the link to. Here is the Tormal River. There'll be a ferry here that the characters can take across to go over to where the farmland is, or they can follow the road around the other side. This road over here will go towards Thentia, which I'm not adding yet. So I'll add like a wilderness area in, and then a gate guarded by soldiers of Thentia who are keeping the road closed. So I've added a way out of the city, and I've added yeah, the road. It's going to need some placeable work and some NPCs and bits of dialogue, but because it's not being made to be a persistent world area, in other words, I'm not going to keep it active for years and years and years, doubtfully. It doesn't need to be in the same amount of detail as Arelith, so let's go to the shipyards. And so now, you can see, I've changed it. Let me just get rid of the sounds, because now you can follow that road along, following the river. So I added the city wall along one side. So what I did is I made probably about 15 areas, all very large, because this is just about exploring and going around. A lot of people don't like large areas. I totally get it. I think small areas can be, really nice. But for this kind of thing where I'm just creating a large part of the Moonsea, I wanted large areas. So I created all of these areas, just the framework of them, literally empty river areas. And then connected them where the roads would start and end, and then started filling them in. So let me just go to the sixth of the river areas. I mean, this river goes for like 50 miles. So, I couldn't do that, but I needed to have a lot of space to get the feeling of traversing something like that. So here you can see this is getting towards the lake, quite far up the river where it's narrowing. This area is not dressed yet. There's no buildings, there's no features. I just laid down the river, put the connections into where it would go to build this large area. So let's start with going back to the shipyard here. What happens if we follow the river here? Well, then we come to the bridge. So this is the Mellivond Bridge. This obviously goes out to sea here. Characters will come across here, and here we have some goats. I can get rid of these waypoints as well. You don't really need to see them. Goats wandering about in some old fields. And then here, this goes up towards the Moonwatch Hills. The Moonwatch Hills will also be barred. I'll have the first area of it made. But there'll be some like druids there, whatever, barring the characters' way to say, the moon, basically you can't take this road at the moment because we're concentrating on the river itself as it travels north. So, but we'll have like a dungeon or something at the Moonwatch. So here, yeah, there's just some goats lingering around. I've put a door here so I can add a mini dungeon. If you travel here, you go along the Shepherd's Way, hence the goats and fields. So I'll show you the Shepherd's Way area. That goes off to one side of the river. So the first Shepherd's Way area, again, I've just connected it where people are going to be coming in and out. This won't look like that when I've finished. I'll be adding depth and cliffs and everything else. Because this is main farmland, between the Moonwatch Hills and the farmland, I've basically got what I've called the Shepherd's Way. So here there will be a stone circle up here, and then continuing north. This last Shepherd's Way area. Now you can see where I don't want the characters to be able to progress. I close off the edge of the map. Here I've done it with cliffs. But I want people to enter the kind of wastelands towards the Goblin Stronghold, into the Goblin Lands, which is here. So again, this area here isn't playable, this area here isn't playable, but if they follow this path down, they can go into like the wastelands here out of the sort of civilized areas. And up here I will put a small area, some kind of farm or something like that. So let's go back to the areas I have worked on. So as we leave Melbourne, as I say, we can follow the river on either side. You can take a ferry across here or go around and walk up here. So let's go to the first of these areas. So I'm just drinking tea, hence the noise. So these are the farms. The distant farms are under attack. These ones are still safe, but they'll be full of sort of nervous NPCs. This will effectively be like a lore dump for the Forgotten Realms. I know the characters will often just be visiting these places once, riding around on horses. There won't be portals, talking to the NPCs, finding out a bit about, what Thar is like before you get to the wastes. As I say, if you look at the map that I shared, these farmlands. So there'll be some various nervous NPCs here. There's no bridge across this river, so getting to the other side, you either have to cross the bridge at the far end or, in that last area go through. And this road here, goes over into the Shepherd's Way that I saw, and the characters can continue on to the next area. It's a bit prettier with the lighting. When you're making areas, tile lighting is so important. It's more important than placeables. You can see here that I've lit the road a little bit, and I've added just little bits of light reflecting on the rocks, like on the top here. You're doing that by just right-clicking on the individual tiles, and it really brings an area to life. Otherwise, it looks really flat. So, for instance, you can see the rock reflecting on this. If you switch to night, you can see more clearly the bits that are lit up. It might not make sense that rock is lit up and the rock next to it isn't, but it just looks much nicer as you're wandering around. So these farmhouses will have interiors. Maybe characters want to go and rob people, but for the most part, aside from like maybe an ankhead spawning on a farm, it won't. This isn't like Arelith where there's going to be a dungeon every 5 meters. DMs might want to run anything they want here in these farms, and that's really for that. But as we travel further north, then we get into the areas that are being attacked. Burning farms, goblin hordes. There's a camp here of soldiers from Melvaunt who will be basically stopping the goblins progressing further on. You see stretchers with wounded soldiers, but then as you travel further on, you can see farms that have been attacked. Dead bodies, blood on the wall, slaughtered cows. And it's on both sides of the river. These halfling homes have been attacked too. I'll give this a bit of a sort of red lighting to make clear that there's, sort of wars going on here. There's another area. This goes off into the Shepherd's Way. I think that goes into the third Shepherd's Way area. But because the river's very long, it just continues and continues. So there's the first bridge, or the only bridge, I think. Maybe there's another one further on. But and then we go further north. Now the next one is 5, 4 is off to one side. Areas where I've just laid out the river for now. There'll be more burning farms here, but they'll be further apart to give the impression that you're moving away from civilized lands. And then the next area that I showed before, this will be largely wilderness. But there'll still be, goblins and caves and a few dungeons spotted around until finally you get to the lake, which you can see on the map, the lake shore. So you can see here um, the road on both sides, a bridge, a tavern, which will be the only civilized area for all of these last areas. There'll be guards on the tavern door. The person living there will be saying nobody's really, there would be a ferry, there'll be a boat here that would go across the lake, but there's really no one civilized living in those lands anymore, and so no one really takes that boats. Dragons have been sighted, far out in the wastes. This is a bit of a guarded tavern. Um, but he's keeping it open for now for the people that go there. So again, this is quite a small playable area. Just this road here with the tavern in the middle, but a nice view out across to give the feeling you're on the edge of a large lake. And these areas together, plus the Moonwatch Hills and the various interiors I'll do, will make up the first part of the Moonsea as a complete playable area. And if it works out, then I'll go across further along the map that I showed, and do a bit of Thentia as well, and the area around there, and maybe in 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, we'll have a full size server server-sized Moonsea region where characters can go and visit all of these places. There is a bit more to Thar from the original module that I'd already done, which is probably in here. I'm not sure if I added it. Let me see. It would be... Yeah, I added a bit of the wastes of Thar and a castle. But I don't know if it's in here. Let me just see if this... I don't know what it's called. The Moonsea. Maybe not. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. This hasn't been my primary project. My primary project has been actually for the Underdark. Before I go, I'll just show a little bit of that because for a long time now I've been working on a new Forest of Spores and Goblin Town and all of these things, which is just gorgeous. I can struggle with. Here we can see Lake Delatorius. I sometimes have to get away from working on the Underdark or working on a thing. So yeah, these areas, there's a huge amount of them. There, the Goblin Town and little cool isolated house here. Anyway, that's a different topic, but it's a really nice, update that will see the light of day hopefully quite soon because it's very near completion, which is a playable goblin settlement. Okay, so I'm about ready to finish, but I will just look and see if there are any questions popping up. Yeah, not really. So I think that's fine. I won't keep this video too long. I'll do another one before long, showing how I'm getting along with the Moonsea development. I mean, I'm not taking a long time over this. My hope is to have it done just in a few weeks so the characters can just, portal over there and have a bit of an explore and ride around on a horse, killing some goblins and talking to a few NPCs. It's not a major update in the way that permanent areas to Arelith are, but it is a big deal in that, Arelith players will be able to go and visit some, proper Forgotten Realms content. So, obviously, thanks to the people that watched on Twitch, and I'll upload this into the YouTube Arelith thing before too long. Thanks very much for your time.